school in India, as in I started school when I was 3 years old, and that was called Nursery 1 for us. And then I went up to 12th grade in the same school. So from age 3 to age 18 I was in the same school. Main difference would be we had less options, I guess. We just had to take certain subjects till certain classes, till certain grade, and then around 10th grade was when I had to decide whether I want to choose science or arts or commerce or what, and I chose science. And after that I focused mainly on the science subjects. You can take any class you want. You know, that's something I wasn't going to get in India. Like in India you pick your classes according to your major. You cannot just go and do any class you want and stuff like that. So I can take any class I want here. If I'm good, I can get an opportunity if it's allowed, if it's, you know, foreign, open to internationals. So yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities for a science major here, and I like
in France you have a fixed curriculum, so when you decide to go to university for a specific diploma, let's say psychology, you will have a set curriculum of classes you have to take in a set order of time. So you cannot even choose when you do the classes. If you have to take intro to something, you have to take it in a specific semester. You don't have the choice. You cannot say, oh, I'll take it next semester. If you fail a class, you have to redo your entire year, because you cannot just say, oh, I'll go forward and take the classes and still take the class I failed. You have to redo everything of that year. So that's one of the big differences. We spend between 20 and 40 hours of in class per week. 20 hours, which is usually the minimum you can get, is considered a really low number of hours of class. 40 is for bigger diplomas, engineering, business, that has a lot more a bigger class load. But that's normal to spend 40 hours of class if you're an engineering student. Then you have your homework outside of the class, but you still spend a lot of time in the classroom. You don't really need to cite things, especially in France. We don't have that many papers to turn in. So it's the way we're graded is we have one final exam that will be just reciting everything that has been said. The teacher in his lecture might cite different authors that he knows. Those are going to be your reference. You can or you cannot. Maybe you were smart enough to go and check out the book and look if the citation is good or if you should do some more research. But most of the people will just take what the teacher says for granted and just recite them in their final exam. But since you don't have to turn in papers, you don't really need to go and get outside information. In some university, you don't even have to show up to class. You can register and just show up to the final exam and take the final exam and still get your diploma. There's no attendance policy. You don't have to be in class to get points. Here, it's really, you do 2 absences, you're out, you get a letter grade off your final grade. In France, it's way easier for people, but that's only for the big public universities. Private universities and private schools, like business schools, engineering schools, will have a stricter policy. Most of my classes in France, I spend with the same people, so after a while, you get used to the people, and you talk to them, and you make friends with them. And in a U.S. university, you're always with new people, and it's really hard to start a conversation because right when the class is over, they'll go to their next class. They don't really have time to stay and chat with you. So a big challenge is to make American friends, and you will tend to go and talk with the other internationals who are in the exact same position.
Egypt has the largest education system in the Middle East and North Africa. Speaking about the number of people, number of students, and the number of universities and schools involved in the education process. And I would say that one of the main differences between Egypt and US is the mass education versus more selective education. So in Egypt, the education is free and available for everybody, through all levels of education. The idea is that you have all of these many students going into the system, and statistically speaking, actually, all what is going to happen is that after this, out of this large pool of people, actually, what you're going to end up with is that a certain portion of highly educated, talented graduates is going to be there. That's compared to the more selective education here in US, where you have all of these tuition fees, you have very rigorous application process that you need to go through. So it's a trade-off between those things. The benefit actually of having this mass education that is available for everybody, especially the underprivileged people, so everybody has the chance to go and get educated even up to the higher education. But at the same time, you have this trade-off, because speaking about resources, you're not going to have all of the resources. Speaking about the allocated resources per student, actually, it isn't going to be the same as here in US. One of the things actually about the difference in education is that I believe, like in Egypt, is more about getting to know a lot in your major. Like there is a hardcore science that you're getting, there is a lot of information that you need to know, and it's all related to your major actually. And one of the interesting things is that usually we don't have like textbooks in Egypt. It's more like lecture notes, and for these lecture notes is like a compiled information from many textbooks. And the point in it actually is that you need to be well-rounded in your field, compared to here in US, where you don't need to know much about you need to know about your major, but not very detailed about your major, but you still have a greater chance to have minors, and you have a greater chance to get more to build your own character through more interpersonal skills related stuff. So I would say this is one of the main differences. Very focused in your major field compared to well-rounded in other fields beside your major.
This level it's obligatory for people from 6 through 14 years old. The second level it's not obligatory, and it's equivalent, similar to the Americans' high school. The third level it's not obligatory as well, and it's the higher education, comprised of the undergrad courses, the graduate programs, the specialization programs. The Brazilian educational system is ruled by our federal government through a Department of Education that defines the general principles for all schools and universities, whether they are private or public. The right to have access to education is assured, is guaranteed by our federal constitution. So the first level, it's until the age the children is 14 years old. Then you have the high school, it's equivalent to a high school. It's from 14 to 18, 17, 19, something like this. And then you have the higher education. So in Brazil, overall, our public universities, they are free. You study over there, you don't need to pay fees and tuitions. But we don't have positions for everybody. So in order to get accepted in those public universities, the students, they need to take tests, and this process is very competitive. So usually for students in their senior year of the high school, the word vestibulares, those tests we call vestibulares, it's a nightmare for every student because it's very competitive.
The biggest difference, I think, is that in China you have to the only thing you want to focus on is the final exam, because that's 80% of your final score. So basically you don't have to work very hard from the beginning. You just have to work very hard for the final exam. But in US, in SSU, you have to work hard through the very beginning to the very end, because there's a lot of exams, course project, or quizzes throughout the whole semester that all counts for your final score.
As a student at an American university, one of the biggest challenge I faced was the amount of homework I was given to do outside of the class. As I said previously, in France most of the work happens in the classroom. In the United States, most of the work happens outside the classroom when you do your own side research about the topic, when you write papers, when you do some reading. I had never read that many pages in my entire life before I came here for a year. It's just so much reading. Having 100 pages to read every night was a light homework for me. Just 100 pages, when it just in France having 30 pages to read in a week is too much. Here it was 100 pages per day, which is a lot. So sometimes I just ended up not doing the readings and realized it was penalizing me for the next class, because most of the class is about talking about the readings.
Homeworks, the amount of homeworks that need to be solved here, the amount of homeworks that is given in classes here in yes. Usually it's for us it's more about you take the class and you have a lot of information that you need to study actually, which doesn't give you enough time even to solve homeworks. But the other thing actually is that homeworks get you more focused on solving the problems, on solving specific problems, I would say, while people actually in Egypt are more like freedom about the problems that we solve. I would say so in Egypt, if you then give the students a certain specific problems to solve, they are gonna solve much more problems, and again by themselves, not in a team. But when you start telling them you need to go and solve these problems specifically, and there is a deadline that need to be met, things are gonna get different. So I would say it has these two separate parts about freedom of solving versus not freedom of solving certain problems, and the other part of it actually I would say is about deadlines. Not many people in Egypt are comfortable with having multiple deadlines. So deadlines are really challenging thing for when you start after some time you start getting integrated in the system. But I would say yeah, the deadlines is an important issue, especially if it is multiple deadlines coming after each other. And as soon as you miss the deadline, you will start feel bad about yourself, and you have to make sure that you keep your self-motivated actually.
The SAT is just one test for everybody. Over there, you have a big test that can be used for different universities, but some universities they choose to have their own test. So that's the first difference. And the second difference, I think over there is more competitive to get into good schools. It's like very, very competitive. Usually people study 1, 2, 3 years in a row to take this test, have a good grade and get accepted.
I think it worked a little bit different than here, as in from second grade we had basically 2 rounds of big exams, 3-hour exams in each class, half-yearly and annual. So I think it's a little different in the sense that here I think there are more frequent, shorter tests, whereas in India, in our classes, we had bigger tests 2 times. A good surprise for me was partial credit. I discovered that you actually get partial credit in the US for something like, say, math. The professor or the grader doesn't just look at the answer or the value in the end and gives you a 0 or full credit. They actually check the whole work and give you partial credit based on that. This was not always true in India. The different testing, I would say, was a big difference because, like I said again, here you get tested every 3 or 4 weeks, and there are 15-minute tests probably in all the classes, and all these tests actually go towards your final grade in the class. It's not like you can do well on your final exam and that's it. Everything you do in the class, all the homeworks, all the tests, all the quizzes, participation, and the final goes towards the final grade. So you have to do well throughout the semester to do well in the course, and it's very hard to get an A+. In India, I think what I was used to there was that you did well on your final and you do well in the class, basically. Here it's different.
This difference in the relationship between the student and the teachers here is in China. The culture is that the young people have to always respect to the old people, and they treat that as your father generational stuff, and you have to be very respect to them. But here, the teacher or the professor is just like a friend of you. You can talk with the professor as a friend, ask any question, even in the middle of the class. And the teacher and the professor is always there to answer your question.
What is called the power index. And for the power index, actually, it's more about how the student is perceiving his professor or his teacher or whatever. And I believe it's one of the culture things. So I would say that power index in Egypt actually is very high, where people are respecting their teachers and professors greatly, up to extent that can get them not to fear actually to say their counter argument or challenge their professors. They always believe that their professors are right and correct, which is good up to a certain extent, because the other side of the spectrum actually we have here in US, where some people actually can come to an extent to feel like their professors don't know much, or you have to challenge every single aspect. So it's like this thing is about the power index. How are you gonna speak with your teacher? Can you raise your hand in the class and start challenging his ideas or not? So this is one of the, I guess, main differences, and there should be something in between these two things actually.
In China, there's not that much opportunity for teamwork. But here, a lot of professors want you to finish your homework or course project with a partner. And you can always see a lot of studying group discussing the library. And in China, the library is really quiet. As I said before, the teamwork and communication is really challenging, but it's really, really a good thing. And I think I really like that, because I can work with my friend, my classmates, and my partners, and we communicate, and that makes me happy every day. And also I can notice my progress every day.
One of the other differences, and I guess it has to do with the whole system in US compared to Egypt, actually, is about the teamwork issues. So in Egypt you can excel by yourself, you can build yourself, and again it has to do with the large number of people. So it's always based on how you excel over this many large pool of people. In US it's more about the teamwork, and you don't need to excel. I mean, you're gonna find if the whole organization actually did a good job. So for these teamwork things, this is one of the challenges that many of the, I wouldn't say many, is that some of the new students, actually new Egyptian students may face, is that they used to solve their homeworks back in Egypt by themselves. They came here and they started finding that you need to solve the homework in a group. Actually, it isn't just like by yourself. You need to work in a team. And even your research, if you start doing a research, you enter a research group, and you need to work in a team. And all of the consequences based on working in a team, through going that you need to go for a lunch, and you don't eat. I mean, it isn't about you have your lunch by yourself. You can go with other people to have your lunch. You need to communicate with people more. And when it starts coming to this point, one of the challenges is what you should be speaking about and what are the topics that you're gonna raise. I would say this is one of the main challenges that many people face from Egypt. Actually, is like that topics are different, coming from countries speaking a lot about politics, especially recently, compared to another country where politics actually you need to know the people well before you start speaking about politics, and going through speaking about your personal details and what level of personality. So it's all about the topics that you're going to speak with, which is still important, and its main importance to be part of the team, actually more than being working by yourself. Mm-hmm. The other, so it all has to do with this teamwork, and I would say that unfortunately, if you didn't show up good team working abilities in the first like few months or whatever, that your first chances that you're gonna meet the people that you're gonna stay with for longer time, it will be difficult to get integrated again in this system. Whoever is teaching international students, I guess, needs to keep in mind that there's a buffer time. Actually, it's just like nobody hates teamwork. It's just like it depends what you're doing before and what you need to do after. All people are gonna go and say teamwork is great, but it's just they need to keep in mind that these people haven't done that a lot before. So it has to be like a step by step. Even I would say it would be great actually for international students, if for teachers who are teaching international students, if they helped them in going for certain teams with more easygoing people, with more considerate people, even stuff like that. So I guess that's gonna be important. So I like teamwork. I want the teachers to know that, or professors to know that international students like teamwork. It's just a little bit a challenge.
The language is always a big challenge to express yourself, your ideas, academic ideas, elaborated thoughts in a different language. It can be challenging. Yeah. I think here is more professional. Over there, it's not that here we value debate a lot, but over there you don't need to flourish so much. When you need to disagree with someone. So for me it's more similar to my work environment when I was disagreeing with my peers. You need to be more careful. In Brazil, in a classroom, you can just say straight away what you think.
The most challenging thing is about communication. And I think communication is not only about the language, it's also about the culture. The way how you speaking with your friend, how you respond to your friend. For instance, it's really hard at the beginning, it's really hard for you to understand the American jokes. And sometimes when you hang out with your American friends, they be talking about some jokes that they are all laughing, but you have no idea why they are laughing at that. And sometimes for something that you think it's really funny, but your American friends may think, okay, that's just really plain. So I think that's the culture stuff. It's very challenging and it takes the effort and the time to get used to that. I think the American friends is really polite to you. It's really different in China. Here you have to speak in a way that's really polite, like can you do something, or they want you to do something. They never just direct ask you to do something. They see in a way that really that's really polite, like can you do something, or maybe you want to do something. Just don't speak in a way that you do this, you do that. So because I understand a lot of Chinese students, they have language limit, so they try really hard to construct the whole sentence, but don't forget about the way you express it. I think that's really important. I think that will makes you new good friends if you can make that correct.
In the beginning, especially in my first semester, the professors in the classes use these different terms for the same thing. So American English is not the same as English, and I learned English or British English in India. So, for example, in one music class, the professor said we were playing the keyboard, and he said, oh, and put your pinky finger on this, and I did not know what the pinky finger was, because we called this the little finger, not the pinky. So, just different terms, like, ping pong is table tennis, pinky is the little finger, or just different terminology in classes. In my physics classes, some of the professors would use, sports examples, physics problems based on sports played in America that I had no idea about or didn't really know that much about. So I couldn't do the problem because I didn't understand the problem, the story of the problem. Yeah.
There are some cultural apparent things, like the way that you are sitting in the class, the way that you are speaking, the voice, how loud is your voice actually while speaking. So one of the things actually in Egypt, it isn't very much common to have a student putting a leg over a leg, crossing his legs actually in front of his professor or advisor. And moreover, actually, there is no way to get your feet to face your advisor face or your professor face. Even in class, you can't sit like that. That's totally unacceptable. Compared here in US, that nobody even cares, nobody even thinks that this is an issue. I mean, it will not be even an issue that passes by mind of a teacher or a student. And it's just like an apparent thing.
French classes, you let the teacher talk, you don't ask questions, you just take notes. Here you're asked to interact with other students and with the teacher, and it's just really challenging because I'm not used to be asked questions. I'm not used to having to give my own opinion. Usually it's the teacher says what's right and you just go along with it. In America, they're asking your own opinion and they're saying like, okay, that's a good point of view. And so they're actually taking into account what I just said. That was challenging to just be confident enough to start talking. Here, you get a couple classes and you have a lot of work outside the classroom. In France, most of the work is done in class when teachers really start talk for an hour and a half, up to 4 hours. Sometimes we have classes that are a 4-hour class long, and you just get a little break at the middle, but you're in class with the same teacher and the same people for 4 hours. And the teacher talks, and you take notes. You take everything that the teacher says. And then when you go home, you just study whatever the teacher said, because it's still considered as the best way to learn is from somebody who has the knowledge. So everything is technically the truth. So the teacher talks and you learn what he said, and that will be part of your final exam, is that you're going to be asked questions and you're going to be asked to say word for word what the teacher said in his lecture. And if you don't say what the teacher said, then that will not be good. In France, for example, or even everywhere in Europe, it would not be something normal to come to school with sweatpants or just running shorts and running shoes. They would expect you to be at the gym in that kind of clothes. You will be wearing, everybody dresses up, but it's considered as dress down in Europe.
To adapt to the educational culture here, the expectations and the behaviors inside the classroom, it's very different from my university in Brazil. Because Brazil is big, as the US is big as well, so we have different educational cultures. So it was a big contrast. The university that I was studying had a very different culture from the department that
What is the thing that you like the most about studying in the US?
Well, for this specifically university that I'm studying, I like the diversity. Having the chance to meet people from all over the world is a very positive point. It's very nice.
We don't really have campuses in France. It's more, for example, my university, the University of Lille, has buildings scattered around the city and even outside the city in adjacent cities. So when you go to class one morning, you might be in one building in the city, then you have to take the metro or transportation for about 20-30 minutes and get to another building. So it's really not everything together. It's really scattered, and if it's kind of close together, like the Catholic University of Lille, then the buildings are in the normal streets. There's going to be restaurants, private homes, normal, regular traffic street going on everywhere. There is no specific block that this is the university block. Our everything is not particularly belongs to the school. Everything still belongs to the city around it. Just the building or the university. My favorite thing about an American university was the great school spirit that is on campus. We don't have sports team, and here they're a big part of the college experience. We don't see people people are not even proud of their schools in France. Here everybody's super proud of the school they're coming from, where the school colors, they have Spirit Day, they have everything with the name of their school, of their mascot. It's a great community feeling. You just feel that you're part of something, and you're not just here for classes, you're here for way more than that. You just feel part of it. Even if you're from far away, you're in, and as soon as you wear your NC State t-shirt, you're part of it. so you can blend in.
There's a lot of video game in the library. You can play in that with your friends, and you can hang out there and make new friends. In China, it's really quiet. They think the library is a place for only study or reading, not for making friends, playing game. The first time when I was in the dining hall to have my lunch, I ordered a sandwich, and I can choose any stuff I want to put in the sandwich, but I have no idea what's. There's a lot of there's a lot of dressings, and I never tried that before. I have no idea no idea how they taste. So I just said to the guy, I want all of them in my sandwich, and that guy looked at me and he made me think I was a weird girl, and asked, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure I want all of them. So I got a really huge sandwich.
It will seem a little bit weird, so just imagine with me if you're sending an email through your Gmail or whatever from other part of the world to a professor in an MIT, for instance, and you want to ask him about a question in the textbook that he has written. How is that going to be different than this same exact professor receiving the email from .edu account here in US? So I would say this thing also I felt like it's a privilege for me. Like now I can access the companies even. There are many companies actually. The system is integrated in a way that I come and I have my edu email, I have my US phone number, my address, all of this stuff actually it comes like that in whatever company form you are filling, whatever advisor you're speaking to, whatever professor, whoever here in US. So actually
sort of gives you an identity.
Exactly. It makes me like people accepts me and are ready to communicate with me easier. I like how the culture is more towards making a lot of spin of startup companies out of the technologies happening here. So that's how you feel like your PhD can contribute to something happening afterwards, or that's how you can start having a vision of how your PhD can get you reach afterwards, if you're gonna say that, compared to just doing science for science. Because one of the challenging parts in Egypt, which people are working on right now, is that the payments for professors is low, and as every part of the world is lower than actors, lower than sports people, all these things, but in Egypt it's even lower than that. So not many people, although people go for PhDs and start doing their PhDs, but it's just like a culture that they are doing it just because it gives them higher social ranking, but they don't know what they are going to do with it afterwards. And one of the things that I liked a lot is that you can do your PhD, you know that if you focus more on it, you're going to get something out of it, which is going to be a company, you're going to have more sense of achievement, and at the same time you can get reach actually out of it. So having the culture motivating you and pushing you to do that, this is one of the things that I like.
The most valuable experience I've had in college in the US is research, actually. I said earlier that there are fewer research opportunities for internationals, but actually NC State is a good research school, so I did find research opportunities here in my own university, and it's been great. So there are great research mentors, and I've learned a lot from them, so that's my most valuable research experience. This is what I came for. Like undergraduate research is not something you can easily do in India. Like I don't think they have that infrastructure or just that kind of opportunities back home. So as a physics major, being able to do research in physics and chemistry in whatever I want in the university has been great. I mean, NC State is great.